Belichick stole the ball. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
United to Amici. Amici powers in.
The Giants play the Pirates. The Giants play the Pirates.
The Chicago Bulls have won their 6th NBA championship.
Swing. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable. I don't believe what I just saw.
Babe Dietrichson was not amused when newspaper columnist Joe Williams suggested that she stay home, get herself prettied up, and wait for the phone to ring. Instead, she left a wake-up call for America. She made DiMaggio swing and miss and outplayed Sarazen. She excelled at basketball, bowling, billiards, tennis, softball, diving, archery, golf, and 5 Olympic events. Babe Dietrichson gave birth to the modern woman athlete.
The greatest woman athlete of all time, all around, has to be Babe Dietrichson. She picked up a sport in 5 minutes. Whatever she did, she was a natural.
If she wanted to be a superstar in basketball, she could. If she wanted to be a superstar in golf, she was. If she wanted to be a superstar in track and field, it didn't matter.
She decided to take up tennis. She had never held a tennis racket before, and she very quickly was able to beat her instructor.
Javelin, hurdles, sprints, tennis, golf, basketball. I mean, is there anybody like that?
Somebody asked her one time, well, you play basketball, baseball, volleyball, football, everything else. Is there any game you don't do? And she said, yeah, I don't play dolls.
If she had been male, if she had been Muhammad Ali saying, I'm going to be the best, then it wouldn't have been so shocking. But because she was female and taking sports so seriously, people didn't understand it, and I think we're very threatened by it.
If Babe Dietrichson was threatening because she excelled at what was seen as the male's private preserve, then she must have been terrifying at the 1932 AAU Track and Field Championships. She entered 8 events as the sole representative of a Texas insurance company.
The night before the meet, in the hotel room, she was so nervous that she was having stomach pains. She trained, she overtrained. She never relaxed. If there's such a thing as athletic stage fright, she had it in spades.
She didn't sleep all night because she had jitters. They kind of got there late. The story goes she was dressing in a taxi, I guess, on the way to the field.
She comes running into the stadium just as they announce her name. She said she was screaming her head off and waving her hands around because she was just this one person, team.
She was very outspoken and she was very sure of herself. And so we just took her at her word that she was a one-woman team.
It took 3 hours of a hot day in July for Babe to win 5 events, tie for first in a 6th, and set 4 world records. She won the team competition by herself.
Babe was running from one event to the other, and sometimes they'd have to wait for her to get over there.
That kind of catapulted Babe to the forefront in American athletics and made her almost a household name when it came to sports in the United States.
Traveling west with the women's Olympic track and field team in 1932, Babe cultivated her own legend as only she knew how.
On the train, when they left Illinois to go out to Los Angeles, she was running up and down the aisles of the train while the other women were either resting or reading a book. I don't think they knew what to make of her.
I don't know whether this was an expression of some sort of emotional insecurity. She always had to be on stage and calling attention to herself.
At one point, they stopped for a stretch break in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Babe grabs a bicycle from a local paper boy and rides up and down the train platform screaming, "I'm Babe Dietrichson. If you hadn't heard of me yet, you will."
By the time the women's Olympic team had arrived in Los Angeles, Babe had alienated a lot of members of the team. They felt that she was brash, and a braggart and couldn't talk or think about anything but herself.
She wasn't nice to lots of people, and she didn't care. It was her that mattered.
Offering to take on all comers, men and women alike, in all events, Dietrichson's challenge flew in the face of a severe but largely accepted strain of sexism.
The movement was extremely strong and powerful at the time of the 1932 Olympic Games, where you even had religious organizations trying to keep women from competing in those 1932 games.
The IOC also ruled that women could not physically withstand competing in more than 3 events, that quite literally they would derange their reproductive organs, be unable to bear children, and quite literally collapse at the finish line.
They always warned you, you know, you don't want to lift weights or you didn't do anything that would make muscle because that wasn't good.
Babe Didrikson of Dallas, Texas, flings the spear 143 feet, 4 inches for a new world record.
She just knew that that was her chance to be the best in the world, and she was going to prove it to all of us.
After winning her first gold medal in the javelin competition, Didrikson's self-generated reputation as the world's best woman athlete may have seeped into the consciousness of more than one official in the finals of the 80-meter hurdles.
Babe, the minute she got to the tape, she raised her hand, she was #1, and said, I won, I won. The judges then went into a huddle to see who had won because the time was identical. And they came up with Babe.
That was a tough finish with Evelyn Hall because Evelyn, right until the day she died, really believed that she had won that 80-meter hurdle race. Evelyn claimed that they gave it to Babe because of Babe's name and the fact that everybody knew Babe Dietrichson and, you know, they didn't really know Evelyn Hall.
I'm awfully glad to have been able to set this new hurdle mark and hope to do some better some other time.
In the high jump, Babe was tied with American teammate Gene Shiley. Again, there was controversy, but this time Babe was on the other end of it.
Gene had told me that some of the foreign contestants were saying, she's not jumping right, she's not jumping right.
She hurled herself over head first. So they disqualified the last jump, which was ridiculous because that's how she jumped, getting to the last jump.
There was so much bad blood between Babe and her Olympic teammates that it was clear that they wanted Gene Shiley to be awarded the gold because she was a true sportswoman. She was generous and graceful in competition and not overbearing and abrasive as Babe had been.
With 2 golds and a silver, Didrikson was lavished with a hero's welcome in her hometown of Beaumont, Texas. But in the unforgiving world beyond Beaumont, she was battered by an army of male sports writers, unable to forgive her for being a woman.
Why did Babe Didrikson want to be the greatest athlete? The important and sophisticated sports writers of the time had a simple explanation. Babe Didrikson became the greatest athlete of her time, male or female, because she couldn't get a date.
Competitive athletics tend to destroy all that is natural in women and all that which tends to make them attractive to men.
Here's Babe Didrikson showing muscles and flair and athletic ability coming out of her ears. Women of that era were supposed to be at home cooking and cleaning and having, you know, babies.
Did you say weaker sex? You know, they both look like nice girls to me, but on second choice, I think I'll pass them up. They display just a little too much oomph.
Women's physical education teachers all over the country began posting notices on their bulletin board saying, don't become a muscle mall. It must have been deeply hurtful because all she was doing was what came naturally to her.
The ridicule peaked in 1933 when author Paul Gallico wrote a short story about an asexual super athlete that was viewed as a thinly disguised portrait of Babe.
The public loved Babe for the most part. I think it was the male reporters who had a hard time with her. They were conflicted. They would sometimes celebrate her success and trumpet it from the sports pages, and other times harass her with masculine and sexist epithets.
She came into the office one day and she didn't like something I wrote about her, and she says, I thought you were my friend. I said, what do you mean? She says, what do you think that dirty crack you had about my long muscles? I said, hold it. I said, that's a favor. Those are the prettiest, they're the best kind of muscles.
Babe's relationship with the press was defined by her ability to use it to her advantage.
Grantland Rice, who was the most famous popular sports writer of the day, took a real shine to her and just adored her.
His writings about Babe Didrikson in Los Angeles did a lot to advance American consciousness of women athletes.
Babe loved to tell the story that she never picked up a golf club until Grantland Rice asked her to play a round of golf after the 32 games. In fact, that's not the case. Babe had actually played golf throughout high school. She loved to tell a good story, and if the impact of the story outweighed the truth content, that was fine with her.
The press comes over, well, how'd you shoot, Babe? And Babe said, well, I had a 71. And after the press left, well, I said, Babe, you didn't have any 71. You had a 76. She said, well, I should have had one, and I'm going to tell them what they want to hear. They don't want to hear I had a 76.
Babe's bragging a lot about her prowess, I think, did show an insecurity on Babe's part. The one way, I think, in Babe's mind that she could prove herself to the world is to win at games.
Every time she outdrove me, she'd pace it off. She told me, I'm 10 yards ahead of you. I said, get the hell back here, will you?
When she was competing, I think she was just out to get everybody. Women hated her guts because she was the Babe, and she wouldn't hesitate in saying something if she felt it.
She'd pause at the locker room door and say, well, you girls gonna stick around, see who's gonna finish second this week?
I stood up when she walked in and I said, Mrs. Harris, I'd like to introduce myself. We're paired together today. I stuck my hand out, she never took it, and she looked me up and down and said, so what?
She was in some ways kind of crude, unpolished. She would say things that I would never dream of saying.
A woman galleryite came up to her and said, Babe, what do you think about when you hit the ball out there in the rough? Just wish to hell George were there so I could have a good screw.
She made a long putt, and it was hung up just on the rim of the hole. She joked to the crowd and said if I'd had one more bean for lunch, it would have gone in the hole.
She would play to the gallery, and she said, I'm going to take my girdle off and let this one have it.
You'd be on the other side of the fairway, and she'd crack a joke over on that side, and you couldn't really hear what she was saying, but you started laughing also, and you really didn't know what you were laughing at.
Babe played on this all-men's baseball team. They all had beards. And this woman yelled out, Babe, where are your whiskers? And Babe yelled back, I'm sitting on them, sister, just like you are.
The Babe was never dull, and if she seemed disdainful of other women, it was because she had been battling real problems all her life. Born in 1911, Mildred Ella Didrikson was the 6th of 7 children raised by Norwegian parents.
Babe grew up in a gritty working-class neighborhood, the south side of Beaumont. There was a oil refinery at one end, railroad tracks at the other end.
Her family was unbelievably poor. At some points, she even said they almost didn't have food, but there was another Norwegian family that would bring food over for them.
They were dirt poor, but they seemed to be a very close family. And unlike many athletes who were pushed by their parents, there was none of that in Babe's life.
Father was a carpenter and built a backyard gym.
She was Southern working class ethnic, and there was more cultural tolerance for sports in the South among working class girls. The Norwegian heritage had a long-standing appreciation for athletic competition for both men and women.
Babe was a tomboy from the word go. She was so much of a tomboy that I don't think anyone ever tried to restrain her.
Originally nicknamed Baby, The legend goes that she became Babe when she started hitting long balls on the baseball field. By whatever name, she was not your average 1920s flapper.
She was rejected by girls who thought her far too rough and uncouth. Boys were actually physically afraid of her.
She was known as a playground fighter, and she would start squabbles and then sooner or later fights.
My brother told me she'd crawl up in a tree and then she'd holler to all the boys in the neighborhood and she'd dare any of them to walk under the tree. And if you walked under the tree, you got a whipping.
She herself said, you've got to play with the boys. And you got to be able to fight the boys, and you got to be able to beat the boys, or you're not going to be a good enough athlete to make a difference.
A multi-sport star as a teenager, Babe was approached during her senior year at Beaumont High School to join an insurance company as a $75 a month secretary.
The Employers Casualty Company was this insurance company in Dallas, and there was this great man, Colonel McCombs. He was in charge of the women's basketball team.
Many corporations had women's basketball teams that they used sort of as a public relations element, and she was picked right off the court of the high school finals.
He'd watched her play over in Houston and immediately went down and met with her and her dad, and when the colonel came for her, he needed her right then.
She was an All-American. She was only 18. She was terrific.
Scoring 106 points in 5 games, Dietrichson led Employers Casualty to the 1931 AAU championship. As her name began to take hold in Houston, she took care of her folks back in Beaumont.
She made like $75 a month, and she was sending $45 back to her family. So she was really sharing and being good to her parents.
The money that was passed on to the family was because Babe wanted to give it. It wasn't because it was asked for. She could just see a need to better their lives, and she wanted to help.
Babe may have done secretarial work, but she was being paid to play. Even then, she knew how to get attention.
She wanted that publicity, and she'd write to the newspaper back in her hometown and tell them what she did in basketball. And she was her own best promoter.
She would write to Tiny Skirlock, a sports editor that befriended her in Beaumont, send him a clipping and say, look, my picture is in the center and all of the photographs of everybody else are Tiny. I love that.
If Babe excelled in basketball, it was the 1928 Olympics that inspired her to pursue track and field.
When she's a teenager, she said out loud to the family, I'm going to train and become the best female athlete in the world.
She started by asking all the neighbors if she could run through their yard and jump through hedges.
She'd go to one end of Doucette Street, which was about 13 blocks long, and she'd run all the way to the refinery and race cars.
Despite the national fame she gained by winning 3 medals in the 1932 Olympics, Dietrichson did not share in the rewards that went to most men blessed with her athletic prowess.
After the Olympics, she went back to playing amateur basketball for Employers Casualty. And then suddenly her name and a quote appeared in the paper, and she was advertising Dodge automobiles. So the AAU said she couldn't play amateur sports anymore.
Her amateur standing was taken away because of this advertisement that she didn't even agree to do for this automobile.
Now, everyone came to her defense, including the car dealer, and they restored her amateur standing. But by then, she was disgusted with the AAU rules, and it had dawned on her that she could make a hell of a lot of money.
The first thing she did was she went into a vaudeville circuit. Her act was in Chicago, the Palace Theater. She played a beautiful harmonica, and they brought out a treadmill, and she began running on the treadmill. The crowd went crazy, and she made a fair amount of money at it, too.
She was doing 3 shows a day and always in the theater, and she got tired of doing it. She did the show in Chicago, and they wanted her to go to New York, but she said, no, I'm tired of working inside all the time. I want to spend my life outside.
The vaudeville stuff did start to get out of hand because people saw her really as a freak.
With no competitive outlets, Babe took her name on the road.
She had to barnstorm in basketball. She would do these ridiculous stunts, sort of the equivalent of Jesse Owens racing a horse. She'd pitch to DiMaggio. She did bowling exhibitions.
And at one point, she actually considered taking up bowling professionally, but bowling paid virtually nothing to women at that time.
In those years when she was on the road with the House of David, she had her own basketball team and they played one-night stands like crazy. I mean, all this was a form of survival.
She was being exploited, although she in turn was exploiting the people who were promoting these events. But she tired of it. It wasn't competitive sports.
She was finding out that the glory of the Olympics was kind of fading, I think, and she said, well, I've got to wake up and concentrate on one thing.
Dietrichson met her future one day in 1933 in Los Angeles.
That's where she met Stan Kurtz. She met him on a driving range, and he was encouraged by her enthusiasm and her dedication to the sport. So he actually gave her free lessons.
She would go at night, and she worked out a deal with the guy at the driving range where she could turn her car headlights on and shine them down so she could see where the balls were going.
Well, I never worked as hard as she did. She'd play 18 holes and then go out and practice that shot out of the traps, wedge shot. She could play it better than I could.
Babe worked so hard at golf that she would actually drive balls until her palms bled.
If Babe was ready for golf, the question became, was golf ready for Babe?
Babe was so sensitive to the criticism, to the muscle mall criticism, that one reason she took up golf is because it was so respectable.
When she chooses to focus on golf, she's doing it for a number of reasons. One is to consciously shed her working class past. And she's also looking at the cultural scene and in a very calculating, professional way, determining that golf is the most likely sport that will yield a woman a living.
She wanted to put the past behind her. She would often say, my life as an athlete began with golf.
Babe actually used to keep her track and field Olympic gold medals stuffed in a coffee can on the kitchen counter.
I used to say, tell me about the Olympics, and she said, golf is my game. It put me with nice people.
There was nothing nice about the Babe's reception at the Texas Women's Championship in 1935.
When she first got there, they had a driving contest, and half a dozen of the women just flat withdrew and said she was too masculine and too trashy for them to compete against. But she entered the tournament, and she ultimately won.
Babe was not welcome in women's golf tournaments down there because she was a rough diamond.
She tried to look more feminine. Her friend Bertha Bowen got Babe to wear makeup and do her hair and paint her fingernails, and Babe seemed to revel in it because she was counteracting the myths.
Babe's new image blossomed in 1938 with her highly publicized marriage to professional wrestler George Zaharias.
They met at the Los Angeles Open. He was a handsome, charming, rich guy. He was making $100,000 a year as a wrestler. They met, and he said, I just took her in a wrestling hold and hugged her, and she put her arms around me, and I said, this is it, isn't it? And she said, yes, it is.
I don't think Babe ever really had a date before George Zaharias. For the first time in her life, she had found somebody she could enjoy, and he treated her as a woman, not as an athlete.
The marriage made her more socially acceptable to the public, and you can see that in the newspaper reports where they would hail her femininity as if it were an accomplishment. Oh, now she's finally wearing dresses and she's finally married, as if that were the pinnacle of her career.
George and Babe were very much in love. He loved Babe, and Babe loved George, and she said, he's done everything for me.
I think they were, for quite a while, the king and queen of the sports and media world.
At the 1945 Western Open, bad news from home devastated Babe, but didn't soften her drive to win.
When her mother died, Babe was leading in a golf tournament, and a couple of the women stayed up that night with Babe that she learned her mother had died, and it was World War II. She couldn't get a plane ticket back to be there in short notice. And the women said to her, look, Babe, everybody will understand if you withdraw from the tournament.
I went up and asked her, I said, gee, I'm so sorry you lost your mother, and what are you going to do? And she said, I'm going to win it for my mother.
She actually went out, shot the final couple of rounds of golf, and won the tournament. But I think that at that moment, those couple of golfers saw her very vulnerable and saw the type of emotional strength that she really could muster in a desperate situation.
After World War II, Babe added to her legend with an unbelievable winning streak.
She had actually won 13 consecutive, and then the streak had been stopped with a loss at Spokane. But Babe conveniently overlooked that and added on 4 more victories after that to tell the tale as being 17.
She kind of lost track there. Babe always liked to make stories about herself better, so she counted 17 in a row. She knew no one would ever beat that, and no one ever has.
I don't care if it's 13 or 17. That's an incredible, incredible record.
People think she was such a great hitter of the ball, but that's not why she won so many tournaments. She had a wonderful touch around the greens, and she could get out of trouble better than anybody I've ever seen.
Home from Scotland is the Texas Whirlwind, Babe Didrikson-Zaharis, winner of the British Women's Amateur Golf Crown.
I must say that I've just completed the greatest thrill of my life, and that was going over to England and Scotland and win the British Amateur Championship. It has never been won by an American woman, and I'm the first one.
And the Babe's own version of the Highland Fling is famous now from Gullane to Loch Lomond.
In 1949, women's professional golf took shape as the LPGA was created. Babe, as one of its co-founders, parlayed her celebrity into instant credibility for the tour.
Women's professional golf was just getting started, and we needed people to get out there and see this. Her way of talking to the people, being with the people, and the people wanting to come out to see Babe. All this was important for us to build the LPGA.
She was the whole show. She believed it, and they had to pay her an appearance fee for that reason. Betty Hicks questioned the money that Babe was getting for appearance, and then Babe says, well, that's right. You know, if you go into New York and you see the star's name out there on the bill of fare, she says, I happen to be the star, and you folks are in the chorus, and I just died.
She got people through the gates in those early years, simply because she was Babe and because of the way she entertained them. So it was a perfect match at this fledgling LPGA and Babe Zaharis. And I don't know that it could have survived in those early years without her.
Yes, here she comes now, the mighty Babe. Mrs. Babe Didrikson-Zaharis has just qualified with a sensational 73.
Babe's celebrity created its own set of rules.
At a tournament, whatever Babe wanted, Babe got. I did resent that, and there were times that I did not sign her card because of some of the things she did.
She played by the rules, but just barely. She knew the rules of golf well enough to circumvent them.
Babe's record spoke for itself. She won 31 pro tournaments, including 10 majors. She established her dominance despite whispers about her private life, especially her friendship with a golfing protege.
Young Betty Dodd was a little freckle-faced, red-headed girl. She was purported to be the next Babe Didrikson, quote unquote.
She was like a tomboy. Some people said they couldn't tell whether she was a man or a woman. They became companions. They enjoyed music.
Betty Dodd was her best friend. Betty was younger, and I think it was sort of hero worship. And Babe sort of took Betty under her wing, gave her a lot of encouragement and support.
Wherever we got to a city and they had the cocktail party and the little dinner or something, well, Babe would play her harmonica and Betty would play her guitar, and sometimes they'd do a duet.
Without question, they were very, very close. They were close friends, close on the golf course. Was there a sexual relationship? That's hard for me to say. I wasn't there. I do think there was great love there.
Lesbianism has always been used as a way to suppress women. Whenever a female athlete became particularly dominant or could beat men, they would immediately say, wow, hey, she's not a real woman after all, she's a dyke.
All the groundwork that she had laid with some success over the last 15 or 20 years to transform her image would be absolutely shattered if it was found to be true that she was intimate with a woman. And so Babe went out of her way to present Betty Dodd as a buddy.
Meanwhile, the spark seemed to have gone out of Babe's marriage.
George turned his career to managing Babe, and the fame went out of his life, and he sort of lived through Babe. As years went by, George became gargantuan. He weighed almost 400 pounds, and I think he became an embarrassment to Babe.
On the piano was this picture of this good-looking guy, and I thought, is that George? And she said, yes, when I married him, he was a Greek god. Now he's just a goddamn Greek.
In spite of whatever stresses appeared at the end of their marriage, she and George had a successful marriage. And I know that was very important to her.
In 1953, Babe's health became the overriding concern.
She said she was tired, and George says, oh, Babe, all you gotta do is win a tournament, and you won't be tired.
She was having a little bleeding, convinced herself that it was bound to be a hemorrhoid, and that it could wait until the end of the golf tour.
What Babe discovered was that in a life of challenges, one loomed above all others. When we return, Babe Dietrichson Zaharias faces the greatest of all challenges, demonstrating courage to the end. In April 1953, Babe went home in style, playing in a tournament named in her honor.
We always got to go see our Aunt Babe play when she played Beaumont. We followed her around, and when she won that tournament, she was really wore out. She was hurting. She was tired. And George and Babe decided that she needed to go have a physical.
After visiting her doctor the next day, the Babe was hit with the news. She had cancer of the colon.
At first, it was devastating. She wanted to give away her golf clubs because she thought, oh, I'm never going to play golf again. But George persuaded her to keep the golf clubs.
When Babe had her surgery, her colostomy, they found cancer had spread to the lymph nodes. That meant that it would return and that her chances were minimal of her survival. And her surgeon called George and Betty into his office and told them that. And he says, I don't think it's a good idea to tell her.
Nobody would come out and tell her, but she knew. She told me she knew. And she hated to think that she couldn't beat it.
When Babe was out of golf and was ill, the LPGA just sort of died for a while.
And through the help of my wonderful physicians, and especially God, I was able to come through with a fine operation and will be myself again, I hope, real soon.
Babe truly did believe herself healthy, and perhaps that fueled her emotional ability to return to competitive golf.
Wearing a colostomy bag, Babe returned to the LPGA Tour 3.5 months after surgery. She finished 15th.
She was very leery of being on the golf course with a bag and very worried about having accidents. So it just took a tremendous amount of courage for her to go back out there and play again.
It was very difficult for her because she got tired easily. She felt weak. Her shots went wild.
She just broke down at one point and was crying her eyes out. And George was there and Betty was there, and they both said, well, Babe, just pick up your ball and go home. It's okay. And she just said, I'm not going home. I'm going to finish this tournament. If I have to crawl the next 9 holes, I'm going to finish it.
That was such a sign of incredible courage and commitment to the sport, and a total inspiration for other people struggling with cancer.
A year later, her sights set on a 3rd U.S. Open, Dietrichson headed for the Salem Country Club in Massachusetts.
She set out to win that Open, and I knew that. But she said, we're going to go leave for the Open, that I'm going to win.
The swagger wasn't quite there. And you knew there was something there, but it was not the old Babe that I had seen. And she was determined, but it was a quietness there.
On every fairway there was a mound, and Babe could carry her tee shot over the mound, and it would hit on the downslope, and she would get tremendous extra yardage from it. So the course was just made for her.
The greens were fairly small, and that required a short game. And she was able to make the shots that the rest of us couldn't make.
After 2 rounds, Babe's closest competitor was 7 strokes back. Fatigue was her only challenger.
She had to play 36 holes the last day, and of course that had to be tough on her. But it didn't make any difference.
Those 4 rounds of golf in that Women's Open, I think pretty much wore her out. But you couldn't see it.
Babe finished 12 strokes ahead of the runner-up.
These reports were going out about that I'd never play championship or tournament golf again. And I laid in the bed and I says, please God, let me play again. And he answered my prayer. And I want to thank God for letting me win again. It's really wonderful.
Her winning that Open in '54 was one of the most courageous feats that I've ever seen in sports.
After she won, she was exhausted. And we talked to her for a few minutes, and Babe said, I would really appreciate if I could lie down.
Here's a lady that never gives up. And this is the lady why she was such a tremendous champion. She never gave up.
Admired, even loved by some of the public, Babe was also the object of resentment, even scorn by some of her peers.
I don't think there was a great deal of sympathy extended because of all she had done to us. The hedging of the rules and running down some of the best golfers of the day, never allowing them to achieve recognition like they should have. I don't think we felt for her.
The players knew that she was ill and they sympathized, but Babe didn't change. We didn't feel like we could show much sympathy for her because that's not what she wanted.
In 1954, the Associated Press named Babe Female Athlete of the Year for an unprecedented 6th time. As for her cancer, the Babe went public and won admirers from all quarters.
Babe told everybody, I got the big C, but I'm going to beat it. Back in those days, if somebody had cancer, they never told anybody. It was like having leprosy or something. And she gave a lot of hope to a lot of cancer patients.
She would say things about the cancer like it was the final hurdle she had to leap, and it was the hole that she wanted to birdie. I mean, she used sports metaphor to try to make the cancer another competition that she could win.
But by the summer of 1955, she learned that the cancer had never left her.
She said, my back is killing me. And at the time, the doctors thought she just wanted to take some drugs. When they finally found it, she said, I'm almost relieved. I'm tired of being told there's nothing wrong with me when I'm hurting this bad.
She blamed herself, actually, for the fact that it was too far gone when she had the first surgery.
I was very fortunate to interview her at that stage of her life because she was very accessible and susceptible. And she said to me that, well, she said, you know, I've taken such good care of my body all my life. I don't know why it's done this to me. She had played the game and life had not been that kind to her.
As her condition worsened, it also softened the former tomboy from Beaumont.
She grieved over the fact that she had never been able to have a baby. And in fact, she told a story. She told people that she'd had 2 miscarriages when in fact it developed that it was a physical impossibility for her to have ever become pregnant.
She said, I'd give up every trophy I ever won to have had a baby. And I said, well, what if George and you adopt one? Well, George doesn't want me to.
She loved children. Whenever she had the opportunity, she'd always sign autographs. And she'd go out in the backyard and play golf with these kids for hours.
There was that tenderness there and the need to love somebody But sometimes you take what the Lord dishes out to you, and if there are no children, then you live with it.
Babe's final months were spent in a hospital in Galveston, Texas. Her body ravaged, her spirit intact.
They had to sever her spine to keep her from hurting so much. She only weighed 60 pounds and suffered a lot. And I said to her, well, can they put that back? She said, no, that's it, Peggy. She was just as tough in dying as she was in living.
One of the things that she told me repeatedly in our private talks was that she was so determined to beat that cancer that was in her and eating her up that she wanted to be cremated so that it would be burned up.
The battle ended September 27, 1956. Babe Dietrichson Zaharias was dead at 45.
When she died, Eisenhower opened his press conference with a minute memorial to her, saying the world has lost a great athlete. That's how much he thought of her.
She was a woman who, in her gallant fight against cancer, put up one of the kind of fights that inspired us all.
She left a legacy as a flamboyant athlete, a charismatic, colorful athlete, and one that related as well to the public as I think anybody ever did.
What a love for life, a love for the game, and whatever she was going to do, she was going to have a good time doing it.
She should be as well known as anybody in the history of our country athletically, and it's a shame that we don't know it. To my mind, Babe Dietrichson, you could easily argue, was the greatest athlete of all time, man or woman.
You have points in history where that individual has gone beyond winning, and beyond winning is where you make the difference. Babe Dietrichson meant that women could do anything.
I would say while the discrimination was not as great as what Jackie Robinson was facing, I do think that in her own way, Babe was Jackie Robinson. She was the women's Jackie Robinson.
I doubt if she thought of herself as a feminist. I doubt if she thought of herself as a leader in women's sports. She just wanted to win, and she did.
In her later years, the Babe received some small measure of social acceptance, especially in the Hollywood community. After watching her drive 240 yards off the tee, Bob Hope commented, "I hit the ball like a girl. She hits it like a man." The Babe did hit the ball like a man, and for that, she was ostracized. Fortunately, her message outlived her. For ESPN Classics Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.